Tonight we're interviewing Tom Keough, who has exhibited widely and does really interesting images, one of which is particularly big. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm just doing great. Thank you.
Yeah. It was nice hearing Karen. Yeah, this is my studio, the main part of it. I paint here and I paint in every room of the house, and I paint outside. But mostly I work in oil and watercolors. Lately, I've been doing a lot in acrylics, especially portraits. And this shows some of my work, and the cabinets are all full of prints. So
You work in plein air also?
yeah, mostly plein air, and especially with the landscapes. And I like that the best for portraits. But when I'm doing a portrait, I'll take backup photographs too, in case the person doesn't have a time to sit. And a lot of times when I do portraits, they're memorials of people who've passed away. So that's from photographs. When I'm doing the landscapes, sometimes I paint at night, but I'll do drawings during the daytime. Especially cars. I was painting a Jeep one time, and the guy got in and drove it away. So the next day I went around and I did a lot of sketches of cars.
It's some nerve.
Yeah, well, so
Okay.
A lot of times I paint on the sidewalk or looking out the windows. This is from East 74th Street, Manhattan. And to me, this really represented a lot of what New York City is. This is an older part of New York. I love the architecture and the shapes, and the brownstones and the colors of the lights. And it's the only painting I think I've ever done without any trees and plants in it. And the only living thing is the guy walking down the street delivering the food. So here we are in New York, the land of concrete and buildings and brownstone, and somebody has to deliver the food so people can live, you know.
Yeah.
And,
So you don't like to include people in most of your pictures?
it's sort of interesting because, like in the landscapes, there's usually no people, but I spend a lot of time doing portraits. You know, so it's two extremes, I guess. This is the view across the street from our house. So I love the way trees look in the summer or the winter. I love the way the bare branches in the winter look. Before I started painting, I did like about 20 years of black and white work for newspapers and magazines, textbooks. And I used a thin croak wheel pen, and it built things up with lots of lines. So I like the fact that trees are like that. They're built up with lots of little tiny lines, and it's like a big giant drawing, you know.
Right.
It looks a little scribbly, but they have a really distinct structure when you really look at the tree. This is another view. This is 8th Avenue and 16th Street. I was really struck by the bright yellow car, which is almost always parked on that block, usually in the same space.
Welcome to Brooklyn.
Yeah, you don't see cars like that too much. And but I was struck by the turquoise car and the red fire alarm box right in the middle. And I love the blue of the sky and the blue of the trees, and then the trees get warmer and everything is built up with like a rusty orangey color.
And then you have a lot of light on the bottom of the tree to the left, and less from the street light, I presume. And then darker as you go up. It's a wonderful touch. Now, did you work, is this where you work from photos or plein air or memory or?
That was
everything?
Mostly plein air.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, a little bit of memory, a little bit of imagination.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that also represents, these really represent New York more than the the touristy photographs you see. I don't paint the famous buildings. This is a scene just below 7th Avenue on 12th Street.
Mhm.
And that's one of my favorites. I love the way the trees looked.
And so did you choose not to show any cars?
In this one, I did.
Mhm.
I mean, I was just struck by the trees and
Yeah.
the staircases and the buildings. So I'm sort of focused away from the sidewalk. I do a lot with cars, but not in this picture. So, and these are some of the portraits I do. This is a sample. This is the Hamilton family, a friend of mine. It's his great grandmother and his son. So I like the way this came out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you did this both with a sitting and from memory? And
No, this one is mostly done from photographs. I saw the baby, but the grandmother passed away right after I started this. So it's a memorial.
Yeah. This is the big one that I was talking about. It's a very big print. And there's a story behind this, right? This has been printed in different ways for different people. Is that correct?
Right. This is a G-clay print that's 11.5 feet tall with a 12-inch border around it and a 12-inch frame. So this is owned by New York Life Insurance Company. They have a big office building in Clinton, New Jersey, which is almost on the Pennsylvania border. The life insurance company is very concerned about the environmental problems. So, when you drive in places like New Jersey, you see these big industrial parks, they're called, where there'll be this big giant factory building and it's surrounded by acres of grass.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in their building, they have specialists that are growing trees that are almost extinct. Huh. So they really love trees, and the hemlock tree is almost extinct because of a little tiny parasite from Asia that has no predators in North America. So the original painting is 9.5 feet tall. Wow. And that's been exhibited in several big institutional buildings in New York, mostly cathedrals. And right now it's sideways in our bedroom, but I've sold a lot of prints in different sizes. A lot of people buy like 24, 36 inch, but some people buy them 7 feet tall, 5 feet tall. Uncle Sam bought one for the State Department many years ago.
Cool.
So
this is a detail?
Yeah, this is a detail. This was one of the first paintings I did when I started with oils. I started painting in 1988, and when I fell in love with my wife, we got married in 89, and about a year before we got married, she said, well, why don't you try working in color? Because almost everything I did previously was black and white. So when I started with the oils, I wanted to do something really big. So it's about 44 inches wide and 9.5 feet tall. And this is plein air.
This is a different piece from the big one?
No, it's the same one.
Oh,
it's just
same one. Oh,
okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a close up.
Yeah. Okay.
And the next slide is even closer.
Yeah. Wow.
See? So, and the fact that I drew with a small crow quill for so many years influences the way I draw the little branches on the hemlock trees.
Mm-hmm.
So now this is another evergreen. This is painted from the grounds of my favorite art museum. It's the McMichael Canadian Art Collection in Kleinsburg, Ontario. The building itself is amazing architecture. It's sort of based on an Iroquois longhouse, and it holds the artwork of people like Tom Thompson, Emily Carr, the Group of Seven. artists that I really, really love. So sometimes I think I sort of got lucky with this one because I love the way the grass is done and the trees in the background, the way the sunlight is hitting the branches, and some parts are almost white, the way the sunlight is hitting them, and some are totally silhouetted.
Right.
And you have these different greens and browns and yellows in between. So I really like the way it worked out.
Now, it may be a pedestrian question, but I'm curious. This must take a lot of time to do work with this level of details. Is that common? Is it common that you spend weeks or months on these? Don't tell me you dash them off in an hour.
No. Some of them went quicker than others. The big hemlock I worked on weekends and vacations, plein air for a little over 4 years. And then I brought it down to Brooklyn. It just fit into a U-Haul truck. It had like an inch of extra space. So I lucked out there. And once I brought it to Brooklyn, I kept changing the foreground, the leaves a bit, you know. And so this painting is done after I had more experience. So I like the foreground better.
Nice. All right. Well, that brings us to the end. But before I'm going to go back to that last painting. Before we leave, you've exhibited widely, and I believe through galleries. Is that right?
Yeah, different galleries, different art dealers. I had about 20 art dealers at one point. Most of them were much older than I am. So some of them passed away. Some went out of business. Mostly they were very successful dealers. I still exhibit with the Hal Brom Gallery in Tribeca. They've been around since 1976. They're a really great group of people.
Well, that works for you, and again, it must be very satisfying to be represented by so many people, and obviously of sales to go with that. So now you've done some teaching, I think.
Yeah, I've done some teaching part-time. There's a couple of community centers for seniors where I've been teaching, a couple hours a week for over 20 years. When my son was an infant, I was working at United Cerebral Palsy, teaching painting classes. And some of that helped people learn to write, and helped some people establish a method they can use a keyboard. Most of the painting students in United Cerebral Palsy that I had did not have an efficient use of their hands. So we would make different devices that they would wear on their head that would, hold a paintbrush or a pencil, or it would be a pointer where they could hit the keyboard.
It's fascinating, and especially for someone like you who works so extensively with his hands, so intensely with his hands. That must have been quite a trip.
Yeah, no, it's nice. There was one woman who was 35 at the time. She was 10 years older than me. And she had never had any use of her body but below the neck. She had no voluntary control. And after several months, me and my assistant teacher got it so she could write her name. So
wow.
I thought that was a big deal.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I think we will leave it there. Tom, thank you very much. Great interview.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes it.